Monday, May 7th, 2018 Instruction Work Group of the Madison Metropolitan School District Board of Education. And the first order of business is an announcement concerning Student Senate candidates as well as representative to the Board of Education. And it says here, I'm going to read this announcement. Looking ahead to our student spring election for the student representative to the Board of Education and the student Senate president positions for the 2018-19 school year, the field of candidates is now confirmed. Running unopposed for the student representative to the Board of Education, Ahmad Saeed, current junior at Memorial High School.
Hey.
And look forward to working
There you go,
with
Ahmad.
Ahmad. And running for the student Senate president, Morton Lee, current junior at Memorial High School, and Rebecca Cutforth, current sophomore at Memorial High School. So we have a contested election there. Candidate campaigns may now begin officially. Candidates will have an online presence on the MMSD Student Senate website. The student spring election will take place via Google Forms for all high school students the week of May 16th. Students will have time to review candidate materials and cast their votes during the social studies classes. More specific details regarding elections to come. And that brings us to our second item on the agenda, which is public appearances. And we have 4 public appearances. And way we do this is I will read 2 names. The first, you go sit over there. Make sure the green light on the microphone is on. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. And tell me when it's ready to start, and I will start the timer. And Kanan is first, and Rashard is Kanan. How do you pronounce your last name?
Mine?
Yeah.
O'Day.
O'Day. And Rashard Daniels is second. Diana Hess, well, we'll go there. So, go first. Let me know when you're ready, and I will start the timer.
I just wanted to pass out a couple papers. I'm sorry I don't have one for everyone. My school has restrictions on printing. It took 45 minutes to print these copies. I'm sorry.
Okay. If you can just pass them down and
Yeah.
We'll pass them out.
Okay.
we'll pass them around.
You only get 3 minutes, so you probably want to.
I'll take care of it.
And I haven't started the timer yet, but we will. Thanks, Steve. Whenever you're ready.
Hi, my name's Kanan, and I'm a senior at Madison West High School. I'm a member of One West, and so is Georgia Daniels. We've been working since the fall to just talk about our school environment and what we can do to help, because my school has a lot of issues, and so One West is a group of teachers, school administrators, and students. And first, I just wanted, I thought it was ironic that I was coming here to talk about resources, and I had trouble printing these papers. But I'm just here to talk about what we do and what what we want you guys to know. So I had a student interaction a couple of days ago, and it was a student that was in the hall, and I went up to her and I was like, "Hey, what are you doing in the hallway? Where's your class? I can take you to your class." And she said, "Oh, it's English. It's really boring, and I don't want to go there." I walked her to class, which shocked me because teachers, when they do that, they get yelled at. So that was my first shock of the day, and as I was taking her to class, I said, "Don't worry, I will help you and I can tutor you." And she said, "Really? I'm failing all my classes right now. Can you help me with my other classes?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." The next day, she told me she got kicked out of class the day before. And what I'm here to mainly talk about is how the PEP isn't, in my point of view, working for my school specifically. And I think that what works for one school is not working for my school, because I hate seeing my hallways the way they are, and I hate how teachers are being treated, and I just hate a lot of things. And that shouldn't be happening in a school where I'm being taught. So one thing I also wanted to talk about is the school structure in general and the classes. I'm in an English class called Creative Writing, and I can't even express myself in that class. Everything is just, you have to do this, you have to do this. There's nothing I passionately want to write about. And I think that's what's honestly keeping kids out of class. Another thing I wanted to ask is if you would consider an education resource plan of some sort that would actually give teachers in schools resources. And what One West came up with is on the back of this page, so if you want to just look at that and pass those around, I would really appreciate that. It's just a bunch of things that I think our school would really need, instead of just having consequences for students and keeping them out of class, because I really think the students that are being punished, they fall behind in school, and that's when they don't want to come back to school anymore. And when you keep these suspended students in society, you have to think about what they're doing in society. And that's all I wanted to talk about. Thank you.
Thank you. Rashard, followed by Dr. Diana Hess. Whenever you're ready.
Okay. Well, my name is Rashard Daniels. I go to Madison West High School as well as Kanan. To follow up what he was saying, we did a survey, me and staff and students. We've done surveys in the hall, investigating students on why they're not in class. Me and Ms. Pryor and a couple others, we walked around the halls, waited for actually went into a classroom, and we have waited after the 10-minute mark, and then we would go in the hall, and we would ask the students why weren't they in class. So what the students would do was they would go to Ms. Pryor, tell her one thing, and tell me something different because I'm a student, and tell me things they wouldn't tell her. And it was just shocking to to me just to hear why there are reasons of them not being in class. And I've ran into a majority of students saying that, oh, I'm not in class because I feel like I don't belong. Okay. And I'll go on to ask, like, why don't you feel belong? Like, you feel like, why do you feel like you don't belong in being in class? And they will always say, like, well, I'm the only minority and I feel like I don't, qualify to be in the class. And, and I would tell them that, you shouldn't really look at that. You just mostly should just go and get an education, because at the end of the day, like, you getting a grade in a class, not really just, it doesn't matter what race you are. And that kind of bothers me because, in a way, because I've had a class myself where I have multiple classes myself that I've been the only minority in, and that does feel kind of weird at first, but, I learned how to, deal through it. And I've also ran into a couple kids that were saying, like, oh, well, we're just, going to get some food, or the class was just boring, or I got to go move my car because there's only a certain amount of time you could park your car. And it's just a lot of, issues that's in, in one bundle, So, yeah, and it's a big problem at West High School, and so, yeah, pretty much what I want to say. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, Dr. Hess, followed by Andy Wadey.
Hi, my name is Diana Hess, and I am the Dean of the School of Education here at UW-Madison. And I'm here tonight to talk about why we're so interested in the Ford-Madison partnership and why we support its continuation. We had a fabulous meeting with the Chancellor a couple of weeks ago, Jen and I, and I'm very happy to share with you that the Chancellor is really committed to this program, has made a financial commitment of $750,000, which we think is significant and will, excuse me, I just got home from Israel and I'm really jet lagged, so I apologize. Like, what time zone am I in? Let me start again. We're thrilled with that commitment from the Chancellor. I think this is a successful partnership in kind of 4 respects. One is that it kind of uniquely draws on the strengths of both sides. I mean, I've been in a lot of partnerships that one side is drawn on and the other side isn't so much, but this, we really have figured out a way to co-create what this is, with the goal of improving the quality and the number of people who are going into teaching. We're really interested in a more diverse teacher workplace, a more diverse group of administrators, and I think we've had some pretty remarkable early successes, and you're going to hear more about those tonight. I mainly just want to say that I think the way we work together has been quite unusual and quite impressive. We've got a really great steering committee. I think that for a partnership that's still pretty young, that started in 2014, we've got structures now to enable it to continue to grow and continue to thrive. I just want to end with one thing that I'm so happy about, the Team Scholars. So this is the high school program for people who want to go into teaching. So the first group of those students will be coming to the UW-Madison this fall. We're happy to say that they're all fully scholarshiped, and as the person who's in charge of the teacher ed programs, we are very excited to be bringing them in, and we hope that they will be coming right back out into your schools. So in close, I'm really thrilled with how this partnership has worked. I really want to thank Jen and the entire MMSD team. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Andy Wadey.
Hi. There's a lot happening, and I will keep my remarks focused on the agenda. I think I can be brief and finish in about 2.13 minutes. I'm here to speak regarding MTI's school Climate Our Staff and Students Deserve platform. You've all received copies of our initial items that our members and elective leaders developed, and you should be aware of the 7 items: the smaller class sizes, co-teaching structures, specific interventions for level 1 and 2 behaviors, shared leadership, school-directed allocation of funding, committed time, space, and structures to provide training and support for all staff based on school-defined needs, additional work on data collection, and ongoing ways to collect feedback from staff. These are definitely broad in nature, and they'll need to be further developed and explored and refined. And we look forward to continuing to work with you all and administration as this work progresses. But what I'd like to speak specifically about tonight is the importance of ensuring that we have proactive, meaningful school-based staff voice involved in creating welcoming school climates and guiding work around school climate, culture, and safety. Last week, you heard my colleague Mike Jones speak to a number of significant issues and the fact that these challenges arise from adult behaviors and systems that adults have created. None of the issues he raised, flawed data collection, class size, dysfunctional SBLTs, breakdowns in communication, and more, should have come as a surprise. These are things that staff from schools around MMSD have been talking and voicing regularly. They are things that create challenges and negatively impact those who work and learn in schools across our district. We know that we face an incredibly complex task in trying to develop plans, structures, and systems that support all of our 27,000 students. However, we also know that we have tremendous community support, students and families who want to make positive change happen. We heard from some of them this evening, and school-based staff that is a valuable and, I would argue, underutilized resource. Positive school culture, climate, and safety comes from a community that can collaborate and engage in challenging conversations around difficult topics together. This is where we need to start, not focusing on a laundry list of requirements, responses, and mandates, not looking for fault or blame, but in creating structures and systems that open dialogue and dedicating time and space for staff directly connected to students and families to come together and engage in proactive efforts. As we move into the next stages of work around climate, culture, and safety in our schools, know that MTI members will be engaged in further developing and advancing the ideas contained in our platform. This will happen in handbook discussions, committee work, and communications with you all about ways that we can build on our strengths and continue to make public education in Madison the best choice for every student, family, and employee. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, the next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes, and I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes dated March 5th, 2018.
Moved. Second.
Laura, your advisory vote.
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
That passes 7-0. And this moves on to, the next item is the Forward Madison Partnership, I believe. And this is an action item for the May 21st Board of Education meeting. And Jen, I'm not quite sure how we're handling this, so.
Pass it off to me and I'll
Okay,
I'll
pass
take
it
it.
off for now.
Thank you, TJ. I'll pass it back to you in a few minutes. I'd like to welcome a few team members up to the table. We've got Jen Shepke, who's the director for Madison, Jess Henke, who's in charge of partnerships for the district, and Sue Gord, who's in charge of professional learning and leadership. Welcome, ladies. I want to just say a few words for a couple of minutes before I pass it over to the team. We are, as you know, seeking a renewal of our MOA with the University of Wisconsin-Madison School of Education. This partnership is something that was born out of a mutual desire to make sure that the profession of teaching was thriving in Madison. We want to get more people into the profession, and we want more to be successful in their experience as professionals. It's at its heart an equity strategy, because we know that the classroom is really where the magic happens. And we're thrilled to have been investing this much for so long in building a powerful pipeline from the UW to MMSD. I want to thank Diana Dean Hess. She has been a terrific partner. I also want to thank Dean Underwood, wherever she is right now. We appreciate her very much for helping to get this partnership started. Today, Jess is going to say a little bit about the process of renewing an MOA of a high-intensity partnership, especially since we've had a new board member join us. We want to make sure everyone understands how the process works, as well as a couple of board members who've probably only been through this one other time. Jen is going to take the lead on a few highlights of the partnership, what we've learned and where we're going next. And Sue is here to help with the conversation if there are key questions. We're going to keep our comments to about 10 or 15 minutes. And then open it back to you, TJ, and the rest of the board. So I'll pass it over to Jess Henke.
Thanks, Jen. So, as Jen noted, as Director of Strategic Partnerships, I support teams in essentially moving through MMSD's procedures and policies around formalizing and renewing school community partnerships. High-intensity partnerships are unique. We have 9 high-intensity partnerships currently, and they are all organized on a 3-year cycle of both implementation of a memorandum of agreement, which details the roles, responsibilities, outcomes, and the budget that the team follows as their roadmap moving forward. That team also engages in annual monitoring processes to ensure that we're keeping an eye towards continuous improvement throughout the process of the 3 years, and then leading us up to the 3-year renewal, which is always supported by an external evaluation. So reflected in the packet that you received for this evening's discussion. So I'm pleased to really hand it off to Jen Shepke. Kind of focusing on the Forward Madison renewal, which has been in existence since 2014, and now we're looking ahead for another 3 years, ending with the school year of 2021. That would be. So.
And just a reminder, the board, Jen Shepke, is new to her role. In what month have you been now?
I will be coming up in 5 months.
5 months. Yeah, we're thrilled to have her leading this work.
Thank you. Before I get into the details, I do want to just acknowledge all the people who've made this possible in Forward Madison. We have our leadership, so Jen Cheatham, Diana Hess, who've provided just some tremendous guidance. We also have some of our Strand leaders present today. So Sue Gord leading induction, and Ann Halbach leading workforce diversity team scholars. So I just want to say thank you for them for being here. Today, what we're going to be doing is doing a high-level overview of the materials that were provided to you as part of the partnership renewal. So you had several materials in your that you received last week as part of the board packet. Those included a memo that described some of our successes over the last 3 years, as well as highlighting the changes to the MOA. You had the actual MOA itself, which also included a conceptual brief budget. Then there was the executive summary of the programmatic evaluation, the WESTAT report, and the report itself, which those you did get a few weeks ago in weekly updates, because we knew we were giving you a lot of information at once. And also within there, you have the summary of the partnership evaluation that was conducted by Drs. Matt Hora and Sarah Kramer. And then finally, the 2016-17 program review, program monitoring evaluation that you received last year. So I'd like to highlight some of the stuff that came out of the WESTAT report, our programmatic evaluation that was conducted last year. Some of the really great things are, first, it was a generally positive review. I think it showed that Forward Madison is on the right track. It gave some great findings and some recommendations of how we can tweak some of the things that we're doing to enhance our success as partners. From the new educator induction section, we found the data showed that participants really got a lot out of the one-on-one mentoring. They found it supportive and very useful towards their practice. And with the seminar speakers, it's a series of 6 seminars over the course of a year. We had participants who noted the impact of Professor Gloria Lanson-Billings' work around talking about equity and what that meant to them as they thought about their own practice in that first year. From the principal induction, we found, like the new educator induction, new principals really appreciated that coaching, the one-on-one coaching with experienced principals themselves. And they also found we're also working on how to enhance how we address the new principals' experience in their seminars, which is what we call academies. And we're doing that in a co-development space right now with Professor John Diamond. The workforce diversity team scholars is moving along. We've really strengthened the program model that we have that describes how that program works. And we found that through the evaluation that our team scholars are really making a learning community. They're building bridges within their grade, and that's really forming this tight cohort. Some of them have said that they're very proud of their involvement in the program and that they often talk about it with their parents and their families, which I find very gratifying. As Diana mentioned, so our inaugural cohort is graduating college or graduating high school this year, going off to college. So that cohort is 8 students. All 8 are going on to college. 6 were accepted to UW-Madison, and 5 have decided to attend UW-Madison. And in addition, we've received the continued support of Chancellor Blank with her with $750,000 towards the next 3 years of the partnership. Instructional coaching was also highlighted within the program review. That's what we first started calling student-centered coaching. And within there, the participants spoke very favorably about the use of student data to inform their practice change. So that's a quick snapshot of the evaluation, Jen.
Jen, I just wanted to chime in and remind the board that before Forward Madison existed, these programs in their current state did not exist. So the purpose of the original MOA and the original formation of the partnership was to co-create an induction program for both teachers, principals, a program model, an approach to supporting instructional coaches that did not exist, and a Team Scholars program to grow our own high school students to teachers. So this first phase has really been about co-creation of models. So we're very proud that we actually have something tangible that we've accomplished.
Yeah, and within that vein too, so one of the things that we've really honed in on as a partnership is really understanding what is Forward Madison, and also importantly what's not Forward Madison, which is an important definition part. So within the MOA, you'll see reflected in that our refined shared vision that we have shared statement of purpose, and that gets into what we believe our partnership is and where we want to see it going forward in the next 3 years. We've also really identified ourselves then in that co-design, that co-implementation space. And so really we're coming to think ourselves as an incubator in which we leverage the expertise of our partners. So in which MMSD is leveraging the expertise of UW School of Ed and vice versa. And within that flexible space of an incubator, one of the things that we're really understanding is that things don't have to stay in Forward Madison forever. So as we develop into this co-implementation, co-design space, we have strands within, and as those strands leave that co-development, co-implementation space, where they're really owned by one partner over the other, then we take them out of Forward Madison. So it continues to evolve and meet the needs of our partners. Within that then, so we are moving out the student-centered coaching, instructional development as well. And also continued professional learning is moving out. That was not put in as a strand, never actually reached implementation. And what we've come to discover is that how we work with professional learning is actually embedded in everything we do. So it didn't make sense to have it as a separate strand. So it's just there in all of the strands. The other part that we've come to understand better is the types and ways that we partner across the different strands. So Dr. Hora and Dr. Millar have an educational partnership type that we've used, where they talk about limited partnerships, coordinated partnerships, and collaborative. Limited meaning one organization dictates to the other one mostly what to do around a shared goal. The coordinated partnership is where the two partnerships are working together, where they each have their own type of thing that they're working on in service of a shared goal. And then the collaborative is where it's truly a shared space of shared governance, moving together towards a goal. And what we're understanding within Forward Madison is that the strands can be all of those. And it's neither good or bad, it's just a better understanding of where we are in the space of that co-collaboration and co-design. So, given that, within the MOA, what we're proposing to you for 2018 through 2021 is that we want to continue the new educator inductions, year 1 and 2 work. We're also continuing the new principal induction work. And we're continuing and expanding the workforce diversity Team Scholars work. So as you know, we have the pre-college work, and now that our students are going out to college, we're developing the college work. And that's leveraging existing programs and expertise that's at UW already for those students attending UW-Madison. There's some new strands that we're bringing in as well. So in the aim of providing access to all students to high quality, fully licensed educators, we're bringing in a new strand to focus specifically on cross-categorical teachers. So finding ways to support our critical workforce needs around CC teachers that are within the district, but they're also statewide. And through that, we're looking at partnering with UW School of Education and MMSD are partnering together to provide a program for these students for teachers who are working on their licensure, to give them coursework that's already existing and also couple that with supports, like one-on-one mentoring, for instance. We also have a Cooperating Teacher Alliance that's budding up, and that Cooperating Teacher Alliance is about elevating the role of leadership within the schools and for cooperating teachers to really position them as leaders in our schools, and having them work with us to decide to collaborate on markers of excellence for the CT work that they do, as well as find professional learning and development roles for them and provide those opportunities as well. And then finally, we're incorporating within the workforce diversity strand a Grow Our Own component. And this Grow Our Own component is for folks who are in the school or who are in medicine schools already. So those who have bachelor's degrees, mostly aimed at people of color who want to be teachers but are not teachers or administrators right now. And it's a 2-year coursework on Saturdays where they gather together and work on getting their teaching certificate. And that is a dual cert right now. It's in elementary education and CC. Some other changes that I just want to highlight that we've learned from our partnership evaluation and the program evaluation are we have a better shared understanding of our roles and responsibilities. We have further delineated decision-making processes and who's making those decisions within the MOA. And we've also taken on things like hiring me, so a director whose job is to care for the partnership and work on cross-communication and boundary spanning across the two organizations to really make it a fluid partnership. So I think that's the end of the summary. I'd like to turn it over to TJ then.
Yep. Thank you, Jen.
Let's start with Dean.
Okay. 3 things. The 2 strands that we're taking over, I guess. The instructional coaching,
Yep.
we're confident we got that covered in our own stuff over the years. I know we've heard reports on all these people, so we're cool with that, taking it ourselves.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah.
We feel fully prepared to bring that back to the MMSD side of the organization.
Yeah.
Yep.
The second one, the professional learning, I know we've had a lot of reports in our own professional development things. Is that what you're talking about? How this is embedded in other things? Can you just explain that a little bit more to me?
Yeah, so we were originally thinking about the continued professional learning as something that would be small tidbits of professional learning here and there for different stakeholders. And when we're looking at how the strands are designed, we're really seeing that professional learning and leadership development is incorporated within. So perhaps Sue might be able to speak to how that's working in induction.
So I think when you think about the induction strands, there's professional learning throughout. I think when the professional learning was originated in the partnership, we were thinking about it more like what I would consider to be enrichment professional learning.
That's right.
So it would be more like Saturday offerings for any teachers to attend. And it would be based off whatever we felt like we had the expertise between our two organizations to execute on. And I think given the level of intensity of the other strands and the maybe lack of clarity we had on really where we wanted to go with it, it never really got defined, and our energies went towards induction.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think we just got more clear over time.
Then the last thing is, to our thanks. I was here 4 years ago when we voted on this, so thank you all for the work that you're doing and bringing us this partnership with the UW that we felt then was long overdue, and really happy that it's going. The Grow Our Own, 2 things about this is that I'd really like to see us hit double digits and higher double digits, like something that starts with a 2 or a 3. And I know we also like to kind of shorten things with initials and stuff, but this one we can't have.
I agree.
You know,
Agreed.
yeah, I'm gonna call it, we're gonna grow our own here, we're not gonna call it, you know, we can't have that.
We actually,
Yep, we're
so-
all in agreement on that.
Yes, we just had a meeting with all the folks who are working on the Grow Our Own, and we completely decided on that one as well.
But can we, now, the other thing, specifically, how do we recruit for this? And I'm assuming we pay a stipend to, and we reimburse, or somehow that we cover this, and how do we recruit, and what can we expect, how can we expect to increase the numbers here?
Sure. So the recruitment cycle is every 2 years. So the cohort that's currently in Grow Your Own began last fall, so fall 2017, and they'll be completing then in spring 2019. Am I getting my years right? So, and then we'll be beginning to do some of that recruitment coming up in the next semester, I believe. So one of the things about incorporating Grow Our Own into Forward Madison is we recognize that we need to be able to understand the outcomes of Grow Our Own. And so that was a big driving force of bringing it in, to be able to talk about the evaluation components of that. And then be able to use that evaluation to inform the next steps of where it goes as well.
Yeah, I think, Dean, it's important for everyone to understand that Grow Our Own was already in existence. We've been sort of dabbling and trying some things with the UW, and we're bringing it under the kind of the cover of Forward Madison, so that we all have closer eyes on it, so that we can take a close look at how the program is working and how to expand it and strengthen it over time.
And provide support, because I mean, helping support the folks who are working on that program, you know, being able to give any extra support around communication or other aspects of it as well is really important, and that's another reason to bring it in, and that's how I'll be helping out.
Yeah, I like the idea of aggressive goals, though.
Of what?
Of more aggressive goals for the...
Well, I think if I recall, didn't we cap it when we first, at 8, I think? And I don't think I think we should take a different look at that and try to increase it.
All right.
And then, I don't know, like I said, how do we recruit this again? How do we make this known to people? And
the recruitment happens on the MMSD side, and I'm still getting clarity around what that exact process is. I do know that the tuition is paid for on the MMSD side as well.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I think we need to, increase our levels of recruiting, our efforts there, and just really get after it a little bit more.
Agreed.
There's numerous staff that I think would really appreciate this opportunity.
I think that's precisely why we want the Strand to be part of Forward Madison.
Okay.
Gloria?
So, since we're on topic on Grow Your Own, what's the diversity breakdown on those who are participating in Grow Your Own, and then also just bigger picture, who are included in this work?
Sure. And
Do you have that?
I didn't bring my numbers with me. I can get them to you. 90%. Thank you. 9% people of color.
Okay, great.
you.
In our current
In our current program.
The
current program, okay.
Yeah. And it's important to know that this is the second iteration, and it is now a dual certification, where it was not that before. So that's an important distinction to know.
Okay, great, thanks.
I'm going to call it myself and start out with kind of big picture stuff, and then some questions, and then some comments. So kind of three parts here. Big picture stuff, there's a lot about this partnership I've liked. There's a lot I've always liked. And I'm looking at Dean Hess here because, and also at Jen here, there's also places where I would really like to see this get pushed and evolved. And I think that the notion of not only in the teacher training role, but also a role of the university functioning as, the Wisconsin idea of a friendly critic kind of thing with the district would be really strong. And I think of, recently we did our advanced learning plan, and to have John Diamond as part of those discussions would have been very, very powerful and very, very important, because there's insights that I think that I think we would have benefited, that I think that he could have offered. And so I think that expanding in those directions as we look forward would be something that I would very, very much push, and as the iterations go forward. So that's the big picture comment. The questions kind of have to do with, I think I'm going to start with a question about the cooperating teacher program. I don't have a good handle about what is being offered to the cooperating teachers and what is being asked of the cooperating teachers and how that's going to be developed. Cooperating teachers are already giving much of themselves in training students. It is, good ones are worth their weight in gold, and they do it year after year after year. But in addition, they teach their own classes, and they take this on. So I guess that I want to understand what is being asked of them, but also what is being given to them in this. And then the kind of the second piece on that is the timeline around the cooperating teacher piece. 3 years from now, will we have a program that's up and running, or will we have a design for a program 3 years from now? I can't really tell from the MOA.
Yeah, sure. So the Cooperating Teacher Alliance is going to be on a design team process, and that's using some of the same processes that we used prior in Forward Madison to launch our strands. For the timeline right now, what that means is getting together. We've determined a small group of people that is going to function as the main design team, and then we have additional people that will come in and out as we need their expertise to help lend to a better design. We're thinking of gathering over 6 to 8 times between now through January 2019. So it's not a long design team period, and then we're hoping then that once that design will end in January 2019, and then we'll start focus on what that implementation looks like.
Are any cooperating teachers among the design team?
We are going to be bringing them in. We're one of the
core team.
The core.
I'm serious, because if this, those are the voices that need to be there, as well as the other voices.
Yep.
That's, I would like this one to be a truly collaborative one with those people at the table.
Yeah, and that's a good suggestion. We do have folks on the core team who work directly with cooperating teachers on a regular basis.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then this kind of speaks to something that I guess that the metrics here seem to cover having designed the program, and they have nothing to do with implementation on the monitoring metrics.
Mm-hmm.
And if we could, and that's kind of why I was confused about the timeline. What are we going to be looking at? And once if year 3 is actual implementation, what are the outcomes we expect? And if we could integrate those in, that would be, or what, something to add to this, because this is mostly we've designed and implemented a program, and aces on that, but
Yeah, and part of the program monitoring that we have listed there is just for the next year,
right?
Because we don't know what they're going to design.
Right,
It
and
makes
this is
it a
a
little
3-year
hard.
MOA, so I guess that's whether we can do an amendment to it or something. I'm not really sure how that would work. Similar questions about the accelerated licensure.
Mm-hmm.
Just in terms of the timeline on that. When's that supposed to be up and running?
Right now, also same kind of design team process involving stakeholders on the design team. That we're also thinking about having that design team really try to get done by January 2019. But implementation wouldn't be starting until the summer of 2019 in the best case.
Mm-hmm.
Part of that is just getting courses on the books and other things, working with governance on the UW School of Education side as well.
And our side too.
Yeah, that
I guess
too.
perhaps just even in the MOA to note that amendments will be done as the design goes forward, and that way it covers the 3 years and gets us there.
That's a good point.
That might be the way to do with both of those.
Yeah.
And then I guess that I'm into monitoring metrics, as you know, and I guess I just want to make some comments on the other ones.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at the old ones and looked at the new ones. First off, kind of in reference to Gloria's question, I think that in a lot of these that where we have large enough numbers, and I think on the induction we do, disaggregating stuff would be nice. To know that if diversity is one of the goals, how are we doing that not only in terms of just kind of raw numbers of hires and participants, but also, is this program working differently for different people? So I guess that would be a suggestion where appropriate to monitor disaggregated like we do for students. The old MOA had both retention and educator effectiveness data called out on the inductees, the new teachers. Both of those are missing that I see here, and I would like to see them. I'm not sure about educator effectiveness data, but certainly retention and attrition. You know that I mean the first cohort we have data on, only 74% are still in the district. 74, 70, and that's not really great retention numbers. And we've invested a lot in these, and this is also supposed to make teaching our district more attractive and more friendly, but 25 of them are gone in 2 years, or 2.5 years, whatever that is. And that's not good. And so I think that we need to monitor that very, very closely.
TJ, would it be all right if maybe Sue commented on that? Is that
Go
okay
ahead.
if we
Go
could
ahead.
pause real quick?
So in looking at the data that we have around retention rates of new educators, from 15-16, it appears to be 87%.
No, it's 74. It's 40 out of 65. 48 are still here. That's 74%.
I have some different numbers here then.
No, that's the retention from 16-17 to 17-18 for that cohort.
Cumulative.
The cohort started at
She's
65 and
referencing.
it's currently at 48. That's 74%.
Okay, so just a couple things about that. So in urban school districts, the retention rates, about 55% are leaving in the first 5 years of teachers in
Again,
urban districts.
The study out of the Department of Education says that number's closer to 82%. That's old numbers that Ingersoll has dropped.
Okay, well, sorry, I just want to, I guess in
you
either
know,
event, it looks as though our retention rates are better than that. I think in terms of disaggregation, there's some questions that we need to ask about how many of those teachers are CC teachers. We know that because these teachers are going in with provisional licenses, and they are actually doing a job that they're not certified to do, and they're brand new, that's a pretty stressful situation to be in. So in terms of disaggregation, I would agree with you. I think we need to do that. I think we need to find out who is leaving. If I had to guess, it would be a good chunk of them would be our CC teachers, because a good chunk of our new hires are CC teachers. So I think that isn't in part why one of the strand has been identified as a new one to support the certification of those teachers. Agreed, I don't think we have great data here to be referring to. I think we both concur on that. And I would say that the work we're doing around mentoring and around the seminar of Forward Madison is one part of the big picture of why someone stays or leaves the district. So if we look at the main reason for leaving, teachers feel a sense of isolation, and that can be caused by a variety of different factors. And so those are the things that we're trying to address in the way that we're designing the seminar to create a cohort community for our new educators. And of course, all the work we're doing around teacher teaming and leadership at the building level.
Yeah, and I mainly asked Sue to comment in part because I think we're learning about what metrics make the most sense. We agree that retention data is really important and when it comes to educator effectiveness data. And we put that into the original MOA, and we're, I think, learning how best to use our data to drive improvement.
And just a couple more similar, that monitoring principal retention I think would be important. The numbers are much smaller, and the trends are going to, they're going to spike and do weird things like that. But I think it's important if we're investing in these people. Two more quick things. On the team scholars, the MMSD hiring data, I think in 3 years, that's too early for that data to be relevant. So, and then I do think on the grow your own piece, the grow our own piece, that how many of those people successfully completed, how many of those people were hired by or accepted jobs with the district, and I guess we should probably have retention data on them in 3 years. So I think that adding those would be really strong. And these are my suggestions, but the kind of general areas where I think that we need to, we have surveys, we have all these things. I think that that these kind of hard numbers are important too. They're not the whole picture by any means, but they're part of the picture. All right, sorry that took so long. Comments, questions? Well, thank you. And again, this is a partnership that you know, I think that it's a long time coming, and I think that we need to keep working to make it better, and I appreciate that that's being done. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, now we move to the behavior education plan update.
No offense taken. We've got Leah, Esther, Quinn. Who else is joining us? And John? All right, come on up, guys. TJ, you know that this is a follow-up to our last discussion on the BEP. We are here to talk very specifically about policy change. With TJ's guidance and support, we've put together a presentation that literally goes kind of line by line through the proposed changes. So that's how we'll proceed at a fairly fast clip, just to make sure that we've got any final feedback from the board in terms of the policy changes for the 18-19 school year. So with that said, I'll just pass it over to you guys. So let's do this.
All right, so the first headline is for safe, supported, thriving.
May I actually just, Quinn, just somebody just,
sure.
just to reemphasize what Jen said, it seemed that since there is, you know, there's like actual text and things like that with this, that it would be easiest to have those portions just called out and we would go through them. Anybody got anything? Anybody got anything? And do it that way. So if you can confine yourself to the individual area that Quinn is introducing or Leah is introducing or John's introducing, and then at the end, if there's things that we haven't hit yet, we'll have an opportunity to do that.
Yeah, so this is basically
just the process. And I think this is going to go quick, Mary.
And this is just the grid, right?
That's
We're
just the grid.
essentially going line by line through the grid.
It's just excerpts from the grid that we were given.
Okay. So
Yeah,
we're starting
you'll notice
from the
the only
top.
thing that's not on the screen that is on your grid is going to be the rationale. So that is printed on the grid version and not on the screen for you.
So it might be wise for people to have their grid pulled up.
Could be, yeah. Nice
Okay.
All right.
For this first part, we have no changes recommended.
Good job. Corinne.
All right.
Let's start. Flipping along instead of
Okay.
here. Awesome.
For rights and responsibilities, we have no changes recommended.
All right.
For positive behavior support, no changes recommended. For this next section, no changes recommended.
How do you want
Can we
to run
pause
this?
here?
Do you wanna
What's
do-
that?
Do you want to pause as we go, or?
Well, I think that everybody has a chance. You have a chance to jump
Okay,
in
yeah, jump
and
in,
wave.
yeah.
And I think this is actually a good place to pause because Kate wants to and also I do. So go ahead, Kate.
Last time we discussed adding some language around AOD responses, particularly given that tends to go through nurses. I'm just curious, what's been the action there?
Yeah, so we did a look at look at that area of behavior and really determined that as of now, our AOD is best addressed through practice implications and how we respond and the guidance we give to schools. However, Kate, I think from a larger perspective, as we think about the overall behavior education plan version 2.0, being really specific around AOD and AOD interventions. But we feel that our practice implications and our guidance around the use of SBIRT and other evaluation and intervention methods addresses the need for AOD supports right now.
Would there be any harm in being more clear in here about the intervention, the suite of options, communication, kind of expectations, who's able to do what? I mean, it's the clear place that people go to for guidance. And
Do you want to add anything to that, Glenn?
I guess what I would add is that is there harm? No, I'm not sure what would be a value add to the the document right now, given that much of it comes down to training and support in schools with it. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think the value would be that there's a clear gap in information and knowledge, and so if, you know, between now and the first of the year, I'm not sure how much training is going to happen for multiple staff members in schools, and this is the obvious place to go if you have a question on what to do. So, I mean, if there's no harm, I think I would like to see some language in terms of if you have a student that you think might be under the influence, what should you do? It's an easy place to understand what the options are.
All right, we'll take a look at that, Kate. You got it.
Nikki?
I'm going to actually piggyback off that on Kate, because I happen to think, one, that's a good idea, but number two, we've stated in the behavior education plan we don't have consistent implementation over every school, that we have issues with implementation, so probably having a written document to refer to probably would be a better way to increase the at least implementation, because people could at least go back to something.
Okay.
And this may not be exactly the appropriate place, but I think that going in this discussion, I want to acknowledge both the students from West and the MTI platform that's been offered as kind of two sets of ideas about decision-making, ways of working, prioritizing that have been, you know, that were brought to us tonight and are out there. And I understand that this year is kind of the tweaking rewrite, and next year is the larger rewrite. And I think that, and perhaps at the end of the meeting tonight, or perhaps in the very, very near future, I think that we need to talk about the process by which that larger rewrite happens and how we can incorporate the student voice, the staff voice in ways that this year's tweak, the opportunities and it, you know, is designed as a tweak, and the opportunities are both harder to create because people don't want to wordsmith policy language. They do want to talk big ideas. But I think that we're missing that, and that's a little frustrating from where I'm sitting.
Yeah, no, and maybe we could revisit this at the end, but the last meeting, and I think the meeting before that, I raised the option of having multiple schools kind of have a waiver, for lack of a better word, but in order to enable them to explore different ways of working that might support their schools. And so I would really like to revisit that in terms of how we think about this next school year. We can do that at the end, but.
For the behavior response chart, we have no changes recommended. So that takes us into alcohol, drugs, and tobacco. What is in red is going to be removed, and what is in blue would be added.
So as a reminder, a lot of what we are attempting to do in these revisions is to really clean things up for schools and staff to be able to more easily and more practically access and apply the behavior education plan. So you'll see throughout some of these language changes being really to make the document more usable.
So possession is no longer, possession and distributing changes to distributing.
Yeah, just a simplification, feeling that if there's distribution, there's also possession.
Possession is implied.
That's right.
Okay, yeah. It's hard to distribute without possessing, I guess.
All right. On to the next section, which is cheating. So again, simplifying and condensing.
Keep going.
Failure to respect materials. Again, simplifying and condensing.
We talked about electronics. I'm not sure, this wasn't the spot, but I didn't see any of those updates in here either in terms of use of school-owned electronic devices.
Yeah, so Kate, I think we'll get to that section. This isn't specifically about use of cell phones.
Okay.
So I think revisit that here in the next few sections.
Yep.
Firearms and weapons.
sorry, can we just go back to that?
Yeah,
I'm
can you
confused.
explain this one a little bit?
Yeah.
Sure. So with this, the explanation I think is in the rationale as well. Yeah, we had, let's say, a few number of incidents with this, some of which were miscoded, and also just looking at possession of a toy weapon, where the toy weapon is not used to threaten or intimidate. Just felt like removal of that overall would be sufficient, given that it's very seldomly used. And for the second one, possession of a toy weapon where there's threat or intimidation or harm would likely get coded under serious threat, with the idea that the possession of the toy weapon would be a part of the description of the behavior.
So, Nikki?
Is a BB gun a toy weapon? Is it a regular weapon? How are we classifying it?
BB gun is not a toy weapon.
A plastic knife. So now possessing a toy rubber knife. Now that's no longer, if it's not used to threaten, that is no longer a violation of the BEP. If someone has a rubber knife.
Correct. I mean, depending on its purpose.
Yeah, I think
If it's not used to threaten.
If it's not used to threaten.
and then it would be the definition of, do you think this is a toy and I think this is a toy, right? I mean,
Then it's subjective.
right.
Rubber knife is, to me, definitely, I mean,
Sure.
a prop. Maybe it's called a prop instead of a toy. I don't know. I mean,
Right.
that's kind of a semantic issue, but that's the example that came to my mind.
Okay.
And I guess that as a board, Gloria?
Just curious on why the change, or why did you feel, what was the thought process?
That was seldomly used, especially for that first one, the possession of a toy weapon where it is not used to threaten. It also does not progress anything more than a level 2. So feeling like it was going to be mostly teacher managed or addressed by a dean of students.
Dean and then James?
The 25 incidents, can you give us an example of what was found to be a toy?
Not off the top of my head, but I think I can get that back to you.
Okay, when I was teaching years ago, I was given assignment to go work with a kid who got expelled, and he brought a toy gun that big. It was part of a keychain, and he got expelled for that.
Okay.
So would that be an example?
Like
Yeah.
A little
a
toy,
keychain?
little,
Keychain?
you know, it was
Yeah.
listen, like 2 inches long. It was stuck on a keychain. He got busted for that and expelled. And of course, it was 20 years ago when I was teaching, but anyway, that's what we did back then.
I suppose that could be an
Is that-
example. I would
so
hate-
you don't know? Does anyone have an example of what was considered a toy? in
Like a
these-
Nerf gun, and if you have little kids, you know that there's little shoots out little Nerf like soft projectiles.
were brought.
I mean they would go about from me to you away, so it's not like super dangerous. But right now, if you have a Nerf gun, so to speak, then you are subject to potential discipline.
Okay.
And we're saying like, hey, if you're bringing a Nerf gun to school, you don't show it to anyone. You're not threatening anyone. You're not hurting anyone. It's not that big of a deal.
Gotcha.
If you
Okay.
do show it to someone, is it a threat? I mean, if you don't threaten someone, but you say, I got this Nerf gun for my birthday, it's in my bag, is that a threat? Is that not a threat?
I thought we were raising hands.
And James is next.
Thank you.
I apologize,
That's
James.
okay. Toy weapons. Haven't we been hearing from law enforcement about the fear of toy weapons in the possession of kids? Isn't this something we've been hearing from law enforcement, that a lot of the toy weapons really look like real weapons? And unless I'm understanding this, and maybe I'm not understanding it, I would like to see it stay in, because I don't think we should remove something because it's not being used. I think it's a good thing it's not being used. If we don't want toy weapons in the buildings that look like real weapons when we have EROs in our buildings, because I think this is what we're trying to prevent. And correct me if I'm wrong, or maybe I'm reading this wrong, that we don't want toy weapons that look like a real weapon. Could be a real problem for the person bringing the weapon to school. So seems to me we want to keep this in.
So I think what might be helpful for this one is for us to provide the board via the weekly update just a little bit of information about the grade levels that these incidents have occurred at, and are we talking about our youngest students who maybe bring a toy in advance of a sleepover, for example, and what that toy is.
Well, we're not talking about elementary. We're talking about where EROs are in high schools. So, because in elementary schools we don't have EROs, so that's not the issue. So, but in high schools, for example, where we have EROs, we don't want toy weapons. Is that correct?
Yes.
So am I reading this wrong? Then we're removing this though.
I think my point regarding the level is to better isolate where these incidents are happening to help inform the board in terms of what our thinking was. I don't think it's any skin off of our back or any concern, though, from our perspective, to leave this in.
Okay, that's my point. My point is I like to say left in.
Yeah.
I don't think it's hurting anything.
It's not hurting anything to leave it in.
So that's my point.
Nikki, me, Kate.
I was just gonna say let's say someone has a toy weapon in an elementary school, because this was both in the elementary and in the high school and middle school plan, then they would they still be held responsible under this? If you got someone with a Nerf gun, and it does happen, and a 6-year-old, I could see or 7-year-old getting it for his birthday, bringing it to school because he wants to show his friends, that's not really a weapon. And I'm afraid if we make this too broad, anything can be a weapon.
I want to remind, and perhaps you can include this in the weekly update information, is that our BEP has 3 things. It has toy weapons, it has firearms, and it has guns. I believe that is the one. And I get mixed about which one, but one of those categories covers BB guns, pellet guns.
That's right.
But not toy weapons like a Nerf gun. And so there's a distinction there, and these can meld a little bit, and you could have a Nerf gun that I guess in theory looked like a real gun, and there's kind of weirdness around that. But so we do have, and if you could include the information with the 3 levels of definition too, that might be helpful.
That would be really helpful.
And then I guess, I brought in knives because I thought that the guns were covered by other things, but knives aren't, and so rubber knives, I don't know where they fit. Kate?
No, it's okay. I mean, I think what we agreed was we're just going to leave it
Yeah.
in.
That's what I'm hearing.
Leave it in.
We can keep going.
That's fine. Yeah.
So.
No worries.
I agree.
Yeah.
Okay.
We have no other recommended changes to firearms, explosives, and flammables. Forgery. It's just a simple move of a different category up to failure to respect materials. Again, for concise and simplification.
It's very,
Yeah.
forgery and failure to respect materials are kind of 2 very, very different things. Forgery is a form of lying, and
Sure.
How you define property.
forgery is, why would someone forge? Someone would forge a signature. Someone would forge a document, an authorization document, a grade. There's a whole, and these are not failure to respect material. These are cheating and lying and committing fraud. So I guess I'm confused by this.
I think it is a disrespect to material and of property of others. Again, it's for simplification of the behavior education plan, but if the board is
So
feeling the
remove
same
category
way.
and
Forgery doesn't go away. It just gets moved under a different category.
Okay, and it's currently under
Its
failure-
own category, which is
under its
forgery.
own category. I'm not opposed to moving it, but perhaps it should be under the same category as failure to respect authority or something like that.
Okay.
That's just kind of, just doesn't make sense to me. Nikki?
I'm going to piggyback on TJ on that. Destruction of other people's materials can be a minor misdemeanor. Forgery is almost always a felony. I consider the behavior, I know we're a school, but still, when you get to that level, I think that you kind of have to put that under cheating, under serious offenses, because that one is a crime.
Looks like we're going to reconsider where forgery goes. Yep.
Or whether it stands alone.
Or whether it stands alone, yeah.
Oh, yeah, good idea.
So gambling was removing category and behavior description. Again, for concise and simplification, we haven't seen this one used very often in 3 years in our behavior education plan. I understand, James, to speak to your point earlier, but we also feel that gambling, if it is happening on a wide scale or in a way that is disruptive to learning environments or in other ways, can be addressed through different means in the behavior education plan.
If this have not...
Go ahead, no, go ahead. I was going to nod in your direction, so...
Could the reason possibly be that something's not getting used is because it is in here? I mean, I think it's a good thing that we haven't haven't had to address it. I mean, it's in the plan, and staff and students are getting educated on the plan, and this is a one that's not being used. I think that's a good thing. So is that, I mean, it seems as though we're using that as an indicator to remove. I'm not sure that's an indicator that we...
Yeah, I'm hearing you say that keeping it in there is going to support education for our students and for our staff, and I can't disagree with that.
Dean?
Who in central office would provide the guidance, the person who runs the office pool or something?
Yep. That was my next question.
Is it you guys that offer the guidance as to if it comes up?
Yeah, Sharice Perry is typically the lead in that.
I didn't mean to belittle this.
Yeah.
No.
Again, I just want to reinforce that our really intention here was to help make this more digestible and user-friendly for schools. Mm-hmm. But truly, if the board feels strongly that certain categories need to remain, we're frankly very okay with that. Mm-hmm. We're cognizant of how long the document is and how much it is dedicated to discipline, and so wanting to strike that balance in a year where we are just trying to tweak around the edges.
And I can respect that. Yeah. It's just that it just seems as though if something is not being used in here, that may be a good thing. It may be because it's in here, and so.
Yeah.
Laura?
Does this mean that like kids can get in trouble for like playing? I mean, to what extent is this? I mean, I know there's been like issues where there was some like teachers were like betting actually against their own school's sports teams. Like that seems more intense than like, you know, like kids playing like poker or something, or you know, teachers doing that, or you know, there's extent of gambling. You know, what are we talking about here in terms of severity?
Yeah, the 3 incidents for this year that have been entered, at least as of data, just around April 1st, were for 3 students shooting dice in a bathroom. So.
And I want to point out that just like when we talk about...
I'm sorry. How did we end up here that we're talking about this in this year? Like nothing about this year should have taught us that we should be tweaking around the edges this year. We're talking about like kids shooting dice in a bathroom, right? I mean, we should
just trying to streamline.
I get it. I just...
I also just want to add that gambling, shooting dice in the bathroom, from my high school days was actually across the street, but not in the bath. We went off school ground.
Sure.
But you know, certainly had violence potential.
Yep.
I mean, you know, that was part of the scene, right? Somebody wins, somebody loses, somebody, you know, says no, you didn't call that point. I mean, that's, you know, there's potential there, and I think that's one of the reasons to keep it in.
Got it.
All right. Next. Inappropriate clothing. Again, this is just moving it. It's not removing dress code violation, but moving it to disruptive and uncooperative behaviors.
So, you know, I've heard a lot of students come to me about the dress code policy, and then now moving it under disruptive and uncooperative behaviors. I mean, most of the students that I've heard from are young girls. And saying that it's impacting them, right, in a way in which they are placed responsible for having to dress a certain way to control how young boys behave, right? And I guess I just really want to go back to what TJ and others have been saying, is really engaging our students on this policy. I'm concerned about moving it under disruptive and uncooperative behaviors because I think it really does add to the concern that I've been hearing from students. So,
Okay.
but also an engaged process, right, with our students about what the policy reads.
Yeah, and I think it was at our last meeting that TJ suggested that we take a closer look at the dress code, which may be, I don't know if it's on this grid later on, but we, in the spirit of wanting to engage our students and not rush it through, are suggesting that we engage in a longer, more thorough process to do something like, you mentioned the Evanston policy that was recently made, TJ, and I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, I was just going to bring that up. So
And just to add that, you know, the point is that particularly young women should not be responsible for I mean, you know, and this sense that there is, you know, that, well, you know, the gender discrimination in dress codes is clear. And so I think that bringing it in and working on it, I would like to have seen at least some kind of tweak in that direction this year. It looks like that's not going to happen. I understand that a full out, but I agree with Gloria that moving disruptive behaviors reinforces that exactly what we want to move from, which is that, you know,
Agreed.
blaming
Let's put it back. Yeah.
blaming, so.
Okay.
All right, we'll make that change.
We're getting.
So inappropriate language, removing swearing, cursing, and making obscene gestures, that doesn't mean that that will go unaddressed. It means that it is, it's written twice in the behavior education plan, with the second one just being more specific around towards someone. Nikki?
Permission, TJ?
Sorry, TJ.
It's all right.
Saw a raised hand and I couldn't resist.
My question is the Snapchat, Twitter, Facebook. I'm worried about the First Amendment violations of the fact that if it's outside of school, it's not used describing the school, it's not threat to the school. If we're going to do, if someone calls someone a dumbass or some name technically under how it's being used, that could cause a disruption. I'm starting to worry that that's a little overbroad. I can understand if it's during the school day, but I don't want that to happen, that someone posts that on a weekend.
Yeah, so Nikki, these are two different, they fall within the same section, but it's two
Okay.
different behavior codes. So essentially, removing the top one just takes away the like the other code is swearing, cursing, making obscene gestures directed towards another person or towards another individual. And so that is just removing the second version that doesn't have towards another individual in it. And then the social media is it in and of itself a separate line. So they wouldn't be swearing on social media.
James?
So just to clarify in the first one, so you're saying that that's only being removed, the general one, but the one that when you swear or make obscene gestures towards someone, that stays?
Yes.
Okay.
And
Nikki?
could we just put on serious threats on the social media, since we're just there, could we just change it to serious threats to the school or to another student? Is there a way to do that?
On social media?
Yeah.
It says towards another.
Towards,
You want to substitute school or student?
yes.
So Nikki, you want specifically?
If you're not making it to the school or to another student directly, if you're saying, talking to one of your friends and use language that's inappropriate, if you post a picture that's inappropriate but isn't related to the school, I don't think it should be used on the behavior plan, and I know it's
Student, staff, or school.
Yeah,
what
there
you're
would still
saying.
need to be a
Right.
nexus between the behavior on social media and school safety. So there would have to be that confirmed connection between what the student said or did on their own time on social media that impacted school safety. So, you know, if you think about, you know, holding a
I just think
imitation firearm on a Snapchat and saying that you might be planning to come to school and do something rash. That has a serious impact on our school community, how we plan, how we support, and so there is that connect to the school. Whereas if a kid said something just sort of blanket statement in
But I've seen
general
it the other way.
about their disposition in the world, it would be different. It wouldn't necessarily
'Cause
be a
I
disciplinary.
just think that the school and the student, at least it makes it more specific. I don't see what the harm is on making it more specific.
And to another could be,
It could be anyone.
It's
Yeah.
implied
It
here,
could be- it could
so.
be the
It should be
governor.
stated.
It's
Yeah.
this is implied, Nikki's just saying, can you make it
Another
specific?
fill in the blank.
Okay.
So
Fair
can we
enough.
just do it?
Mhm. Yes.
I got another
Got it,
question
yeah.
about this, though.
Go ahead,
that
Tina.
if I printed out a picture of myself with a gun and put it in somebody's mailbox, in another student's mailbox, in a teacher's mailbox, with threatening language written on it, that's not a violation of school rules. But if I did the same thing on Snapchat, it would be.
That would still be addressed under serious threat, which is still going to be included. We included this language as its own behavior description to specifically call out social media.
So if all that took place outside of school, and I didn't mention the school at all, and I just said that would be a violation of our behavior education plan. If I went and, if I put a threatening letter in a teacher's mailbox, said, I'm going to get you outside of school.
Yeah. Yeah.
That would be
A serious
Violation of the
threat.
BEP.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
Fine.
absolutely.
That's that. I wanted to know if the parallel existed.
Yes.
And
Yeah,
that's what I was
absolutely.
asking.
Yes.
Yep. Anything else with this one?
Yeah.
All right. Inappropriate physical contact. So physical attack against a student. As you can see, we have the updated language from our conversation 2 weeks ago.
Changes as a
That's right.
reminder.
Nikki, sorry. Sorry,
Um,
I was reading.
My problem with this, I'm not for fighting. I'm not for physical violence. But my problem is that people who have been bullied may be punished. They may be picked on multiple times and get into fights they didn't start. You could be a victim, be caught, and try and get out of it, and you may not be able to, and we end up punishing the wrong one. That's what I'm worried about. So when you go, I was fine until the 3 fights and then suspension. My problem being is, if you're not the one starting the fight, if you're the one being attacked, and you're doing as much as you can, and you're still being attacked, your safety is the one at risk already. We can't fight back under the BEP on fighting. We're not, self-defense is not allowed. Only protection, not fighting back. And my problem being is, if someone keeps after somebody, I think we could group the perpetrator and the victim into the same class. And that could lead to some major educational issues on someone who didn't do anything other than being there.
James, then Gloria.
Yeah, I was going to talk about this under, there's a glossary here, but I think Nikki has a point, because I don't agree with what's we're thinking about putting in the glossary. I agree totally with, we have individuals that's doing multiple fights, and somehow we got to figure out what to do about this. So I totally agree with that. And maybe 3, I don't know if 3, 4, 2. Got 3 here, I'm fine with it. We have to put a stop to the individuals with multiple fights. But I do think that we have to distinguish between someone that's defending themselves versus someone that's the aggressor.
Can I speak to that quick, James? Would that help clarify, or do you want to finish your point?
Respond to what you
Yeah, of course. So, and part of this is we don't see it as an or, we see it as kind of a both and. So what we need to do is support our schools with a more specific way of going about investigating fights to make sure that part of that investigation looks at how did it start, why did it start, is there bullying suspected to be involved, which I think is happening in pockets right now, but we want to systematize that. That documentation would then be a part of, if it does get to a point where a student is in part of 3 days, that we would review that investigation and make a determination. And we'd be working with schools well before that as well to make sure that they had something in place to support both students.
Okay, but here's my issue, and you have to jump to glossary, because the glossary you talk about self-defense. And the self-defense is described as an action taken to restrain or block an attack by another person or to shield oneself from being hit by another person. I'm fine with that. Okay, I'm fine. But then it says retaliating by hitting a person back is not self-defense and will be considered as fighting. That's where I have my problem, because what you're telling me is that someone could be pounding on me and somehow I got to be Muhammad Ali blocking and bobbing and weaving, and I may not have that skill set. When in fact, hitting somebody back is in fact self-defense, at least from the side of the track I came from. You have to defend yourself. And so, and not only that, the training that we get, what is the training the police departments are giving now for school? What's that called?
The CRACE?
Active shooter training. Well, part of that training is about fighting back. That's so their definition of self-defense is fighting back. So what we're saying here, we're defining fighting as a person trying to defend themselves. So that part of it I have a problem with. I think that at some point a person has to be able to defend themselves. And so, you know, it may make it difficult for staff to, you know, but I think a person has to be able to defend themselves.
And just to note, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this language is not actually new. It was listed.
I don't care if it's new or old.
Okay,
We're pointing it out now.
I just want you to know that that was in the BEP.
Yeah.
I think we added it last year.
Okay.
And so our recommendation was simply to move it to the
So all I'm saying is
but
that, for me,
you're
I think we have to determine who the aggressor is, and we need to, the people who are starting fights in our schools that are causing these situations. To me, that's why I want my focus. Someone who doing everything they can to stay out of a fight, but they're getting punched and punched before help gets there. You know, you get punched a lot in 30 seconds, you know, and so that person might have to defend themselves.
So I hear you, James.
Gloria, and then Nikki. Gloria?
Yeah, I have mixed feelings about this one because, I mean, I think that, I mean, we should be able to, bullying is definitely an issue in our schools, and we should be monitoring that and providing support to the students who are being bullied and how to react, right? But I don't agree with reacting with physical force. So, I mean, I feel like, yes, definitely self-defense, but there has to be a point where we have to teach our children that physical force is not the appropriate response. And so that's where I'm at.
Nikki?
My issue is, and I know I use myself a lot, but I'm going to do it again, as someone who had a restraining order to attend middle school because of severe bullying, for people who tried to throw me down window wells and flights of stairs. If I were suspended for fighting back, I would have been dead. And I would rather it not go to that. And I know that's an extreme example, but very simply, what you are saying is if you fight back, you risk the right of being suspended. I'm sorry, but what you're doing is you're giving the bullies a hand up and saying it's okay when we have to protect ourselves and we might not be all right and we might not make it.
I agree with a lot of what's been said about both protecting yourself and also the bullying piece. And I think the bullying piece hits home with many, myself included. I keep flashing back on 6th grade when people talk about this. And I got into a lot of fights in 6th grade. I probably wouldn't have attended many days, and a lot of it was because of social things. And so I think that hits hard. I think we need to pull apart. What's new here is the mandatory progressivity and the form of the progressivity.
That's right.
There used to be discretionary progressivity, and I think that we've all experienced, we're all kind of frustrated with the fact that things haven't progressed, that things continually coded at 2s and not going to more serious responses. But the mandatory progressivity is it goes in two directions here. One is the suspension, and suspensions, there are times when they are appropriate. I think it's rarely that they're mandatory, that they should be mandatory though. And the second is this alternative setting, and I think that number one is we have to define the alternative setting, but number two is that there's nothing here about if a kid gets into three or more fights, regardless of the circumstances, you know, we're going to provide 6 hours of counseling. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. It's suspension or move the kid out of the school. And the idea of providing appropriate support so kids can learn and function in these environments seems to be lost in this here. So I think that most of us share the idea that we need to get back to progressivity, but I don't think progressivity necessarily means removing the child from school either via suspension or via alternative setting. That's my personal feeling, that the response should progress, but it should be a more supportive and educative response as the philosophy goes. Laura, and then James, and then Mary.
Yeah, so I definitely agree with that, like, as a philosophy, but I think just in terms of looking at how much fights have, like, just continued to grow at West, particularly this year, it just seems different somehow this year, like more intense, is that what I hear from teachers is that they get a certain messaging about suspensions, is that they don't want to be seen as like being the school that has more suspensions. So when it's left up to people's discretion, they want to avoid the image of additional suspensions, and so it's allowed to continue and then fester. And I think this year in particular, we've seen a lot of things that are like clamped down for a little bit and then they pop back up and then they draw more people into it. So I think that like the mandatory progressivity, in my mind, I feel like there has to be like putting a foot down at some point. Like it's gotten like pretty bad this year, and I feel like it'd be helpful for teachers if they had some level of clarity so that it wouldn't be on them when this became a greater, more severe issue.
James, and then Mary.
Okay, because my original point I think got really diluted here, and we started talking about bullying and everything else. So I just want to make sure that we come back and talk about just this definition of fighting, which is in the glossary. I want to make sure we talk about what fighting is. But to this point about 3 fights and you're out, so after a person is fighting, don't they get some supports along the way? Do we just sort of, you had a fight and didn't do anything, you're fighting on 3 fights and you're out? What happens after a fight? Isn't there supports along the way?
Yeah, there
Interventions?
there are supports and interventions along the way. And again, the feedback that we received was from our community, from our school leaders, and from our teachers, saying that the supports along the way are helpful for most students. There are some students that the repetition of the fights and keep coming back to it, we're not sure what to do. And so we have some students that do get to 3 or 4 of these incidents where those interventions, those supports, the separation, the really trying to get creative has run its course.
Mary, and then Nikki.
Did you say whether this 3 is in a year?
It's in one school year.
In one school year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think we do need the progressivity. I think there has to be that knowing that this can't go on and on and on. And I think I hear what people are saying. I understand. I don't think it's first time or second time, but I think we need to have some tool in the tool chest. This is, the suspensions is, or the alternative setting is certainly something that can be recommended, not to exceed the semester. Right. Is the suspension automatic, or is that a recommendation as well?
The suspension would be automatic. Even if this wasn't changed, it would still happen with the current policy.
I think what I'd be looking at too, in terms of how we address the issue rather than just the discipline, is whether it's is what comes with suspension.
Yeah.
And I favor an alternative setting rather than getting the kids out of school. Is how do we create an alternative setting that gets them the supports, because just not being in school and then coming back, I think that to me doesn't sound like we're necessarily addressing the issue. And whether they're on whatever side of the fight that they're on, and a lot of what I hear, it's really in some ways difficult to tell, because where does the bullying start and where's the reactive going to be, is that an alternative setting would be one in which we help that student develop other ways of addressing and that's what I would like to see. And I think 3 in a year is a point at which we need some type of intervention that gets them in an alternative setting or support that we can address this.
Yeah, and just as a reminder, if I can interject real quickly, the problem we were trying to solve is that it caps out right now at suspension. So student keeps getting in fights, they just keep getting suspended over and over again.
Yeah.
Despite the interventions that we're providing, those interventions aren't intense enough, and we think the alternative setting could potentially provide that kind of tier 3 intervention that would be required to disrupt the pattern that the student is in.
Here's my problem with that. I've seen the IAES settings through work. And I'd love for Mary to have it that way that Mary describes. That would be wonderful. It's not happening. That the people aren't getting that kind of instruction in the alternative setting. And that's the problem. It's not happening. So that's one problem. My second problem is the mandatory. Teachers are saying we still want flexibility. Making something mandatory without considering the consequences takes more teacher freedom rather than less, in my opinion, because you're saying to the teacher, I don't trust your judgment, I'm making this mandatory. I'm not saying that it's minor, and I'm not, but I just don't think that the mandatory piece, I think it has to be decided on a case-by-case basis. Otherwise, what you're going to have are people who are either A, going to be afraid to use it, period, because it might, or B, we're going to start separating everyone, and I don't want that either.
One thing that I do just want to draw your attention to, and John, since you serve on the expulsion review team, jump in, please, is that while what we're not saying here necessarily is a recommendation for expulsion. So when I say the expulsion review team, please know that that is the body and the way of working that we are suggesting, but it is not necessarily that this is an expulsion. So I just want to put that out there first. So the thing that I think will be really important for this particular area is a recognition that that team, which includes Sharice Perry, John Harper, and Karen Kepler, look very closely at the interventions that have been in place for that student and the ways in which we have supported them, and whether or not that those support and interventions are congruent and matched with the function of a student's behavior, and done so in an evidence-based way. And so that being one piece of it, and the second being understanding the precipitating factors or the circumstances that potentially led to a behavior. So was there a fighting dynamic that was really rooted in bullying? And so the expulsion review team, or that body, would be looking at these type of conditions prior to making a decision for an alternative setting. The other thing that is not in here is a prescription as to what that alternative setting might be, depending on if it is a student disability or not, that could impact things. It is not actually to even say that an alternative setting couldn't be developed for a student within a traditional and comprehensive school, in a pull-out setting in another environment, for example. And it could extend to a different school building or a different alternative program building on the other end of the spectrum. So we are really looking at a case-by-case, using that expulsion review team process that we feel has been a strong way in which to understand our students and their behaviors. John, I don't know if you want to add anything.
I would like to just provide you some reassurance that the expulsion review team really investigates each and every one. These are obviously one case by case, and there's an extraordinary review. I mean, these usually take almost a week to really delve into every single detail and really understand the aggressor, aggressee, that type of thing. So I guess I would see this as being no different from that in terms of the level of scrutiny, to understand the facts, to understand the pattern. And to Mary's point, this is simply, if you look up there, it says may be placed in an alternative setting. This gives the school district personnel an option to consider among a menu of options that would be within the team's repertoire, so to speak, of actions. So, I mean, I think this is taking a stance on individuals who are engaging in multiple significant behavioral events.
I believe Kate and then Nikki, are you?
I would like to talk about some stuff that isn't on any of the
So we
pages
will
here,
get
so
to
I would
that.
I'd like to move through
I
so
just-
that we can talk about some
My
of this.
one other issue is I worry on implementation. I'm seeing individuals with disabilities getting letters home for behavior that is related to disability. I know one who was facing a suspension who's a nonverbal individual who's autistic. I've openly seen that. And my question is, clearly, if we're not even including the classroom teacher, is this really an in-depth review? But I will let that go because we have a lot of other issues. But I really do think we need to make this a much more transparent process.
I guess that well, I've got two questions, just real quick. When it says suspension there, is that assumed to be out-of-school suspension, or does that include in-school suspensions?
It would be out of school. It starts at a level
So if we
3.
can clarify that language. And then looking at the BEP itself, currently fighting is response levels 2, 3, 4. Begins at 2 and can progress to 4 with that discretionary here. Response level 3 says up to 3 days out of school suspension. Does that up to mean 0 to 3 days, or does it mean 1 to 3 days?
So a couple of things. The level 2 is for elementary behavior education plan only. The secondary plan, this is only for our secondary behavior education plan, would start at a level 3 and progress no further than a level 4. To answer your question about up to 3 days, can be a 0-day suspension for a 6th grade student.
But for a
For
7th grade,
7 through
be
12.
1 or more.
Yes, right.
Okay. All right. I think we move on.
Look like we're right back to the definition.
Yeah, so this is fighting, which we just discussed.
Re-emphasizing James's point about self-defense.
Yeah, I think we have to make a decision about, it's the last sentence, retaliating. No, when there's a fight, don't you investigate, right? You investigate how it happened and those types of things. So I mean, this last sentence is just troubling for me. Retaliating by hitting a person back is not self-defense. And so you're basically saying if you defend yourself, we're going to treat that as fighting. So you're saying if someone attacks you, then you can't do anything about it. You just better, I don't know, whatever you do. But you certainly better not hit the person back. So we're considering that as, that's not self-defense, that's fighting. So I guess I disagree with the definition and that last sentence.
I do too. I'm sorry, but people who are getting attacked, you're asking someone to say, okay, I'm going to allow you to beat me, and all I can do is cower in a corner, and I can't run, and I'm supposed to, otherwise I could get suspended. By doing that.
See if anyone else has language that might speak to this issue.
Sorry, TJ.
And no, I'm just saying that I think that we've kind of, everybody knows where everyone stands here. I think this is going to be one where we might have amendments for the floor when we vote on this on the 21st, and we might have to tweak language at that time. And if you could explore language that other districts are using and have those options before us, that might move us faster at that time. And
You can't
faster
agree
at
now
this
that
time.
you get removed that last sentence?
I think the challenge, James, is
I understand you're trying to make it easier for staff, but that just doesn't make a whole lot of sense in the real world.
I understand your point entirely. I think what's challenging is when it's clear to everyone that you can hit back and say, well, it was self-defense. It just becomes, when you investigate, I mean, it's really hard to pull apart. And in some ways, I'm thinking worst case scenario, of course, I don't think that's necessarily the way to think about it. It might promote people.
I mean, and I also think.
Yeah, it's just
Dean, Gloria, and then let's try and move on. And I do think we're going to have to continue this discussion at the main meeting.
We're not going to solve it.
Not the life I've been. That don't make any sense.
Yeah, me either. I've never not believed in the right of self-defense, even with our staff. This is difficult for me to. I've been in situations where where you could legitimately say I was defending myself and hit first. So that's how I don't see any. I would rely on the ERT team to investigate after the first, second, third, and have them do their investigation and let them determine what the real deal was and dish out the appropriate response according to what they find out. That's legitimate. We can't sit here and because every situation is different. So let them do their jobs. And what's described here in a one short paragraph involves what John was describing, a week's worth of review. Let them do their jobs and determine who was right and who was wrong. And there are different responses to someone who's getting beat and hit back. You got to give him his due. It's his right to hit back and defend himself. He can't not do that. So let's just to try to say hitting back is just as bad as the other one. I don't know. None of us believe that. I've had problems with this ever since I've been on the board.
Look, could you guys propose 3 options for language and send it out to us on Thursday?
We will talk about it on the 21st.
Yeah, because if I may, we did not have this discussion in the level of depth that we're having because all we were talking about is moving it. Yes, we don't have an answer necessarily.
This is not new language, so we actually have an opportunity to see what we can find this year from this being policy this year.
Cool. Gloria, did you have?
Well, I just want to, bringing in my former law enforcement experience, I think that, in trying to keep our kids away from the criminal justice system, right, we have to give them other tools besides responding that way. I mean, by physical force, I get being hit and wanting to hit back. But the reality of what our kids are dealing with and what our schools are dealing with today, law enforcement is going to get involved. And what does that happen? It leads us to a whole different level of accountability and impact on these children. So I just want to throw that out there. I mean, I think we should do whatever we can to keep our kids from retaliating with physical force, because it just adds to the situation in our schools. So that's where I'm at.
Something new, Nikki?
Yeah, just one
that's
little
'cause
question.
again,
I have a
think that
question
we're
for
almost
John.
through this chart.
Do we have any data on how suspensions affect the school to prison pipeline? Do we have any information on if the number of suspensions increase the ability for kids to commit crimes? Does that data exist?
Not local, but national. It would be my answer.
I don't know.
The same thing. We do not have internal data to that
I'm just
research study,
curious.
but there's clearly many studies on that topic, national data sets.
I was just curious because I really don't know. So.
Okay. Hit it, Quinn.
All right, thanks.
We're getting there.
So the next one is just a change to the category overall: inappropriate touching, exposure, and/or sexual contact. There's no other changes recommended here. Inappropriate use of technology. This is district-provided technology. This is not cell phone technology, so there's a differentiation. There's no recommended changes as far as district district-handed out devices.
I understand, if my memory, and I've shut my computer, but there's no language about district-provided devices right now?
No, there are no recommended changes. It can go from a level 1 to a level 4.
Specifies district-level devices.
It does. Indecent exposure is to move under the category that was just named: inappropriate touching, exposure, etc. So again, for simplicity. Whoops. And then we have no recommended changes for those next 3. And Kate, the use of unauthorized items is cell phones. Currently, the language does say unauthorized items, not district-approved items that are brought in and used, which would include a cell phone or a tablet.
Just on that topic, there's been, in the last 2 years, there's been at least 3 or 4 pilots I know of on cell phone control. And I don't think we've gotten any kind of comprehensive update on any of the 3 or 4. And I understand those aren't policy, those are implementation pieces, but I think that those are something that we need to know.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, absolutely. And those pilots are still ongoing, but we can absolutely provide a first look at how they're going. TJ, would that be helpful prior to the vote, or are you thinking?
Yeah,
that would be
very
Kate says yes, so I'll
yes, awesome.
Okay. Keep going.
So we have glossary of terms. So not to spark anything back, just showing that this would be moved under glossary of terms and removed from where fighting is.
There was another suggestion last time around, the glossary taking out kind of the disruptions, excluding interruptions, etc. Is there a reason that you guys didn't decide to take that out?
Yeah, there was, and I don't know, I need the BEP in front of me. There was, I think, Kate, a misunderstanding as to how it was currently written. And if you just give me 1 second, I can pull that up and clarify that.
Yeah, I mean, it says note disruption does not include side conversations.
Yes, I'll pull it
and
up. Just let me pull it up
interruptions.
so I can speak to it correctly.
Okay. I mean, the recommendation was just take it out so that we could leave it up to staff judgment. So.
Okay, I'll come back to that one in just a second, Kate.
Okay.
If you wanna do that.
I have
Okay,
one.
you got it.
I have. This is the last one, right?
This is the last one. So if you want to continue with yours.
Yeah, maybe I'll
would
just
you-
I'll just
and
continue.
while Leah pulls that up.
Yeah, no, I mean, I just wanted to kind of take a step back. I mean, we've just spent an hour wordsmithing and talking about which section of the BEP things live in, and we're here with a bunch of folks from our community who are bearing with us because a child brought a gun into a school 2 months ago, and because we're having multiple fights in schools, sometimes on the same day, multiple fights with the same kids. Like the BEP is not working. And I certainly don't feel that the changes we've talked about tonight are going to significantly change the climate in our schools for our staff or for our students in the coming year. And so, I mean, Leah, you said earlier tonight, this year is just about tweaking around the edges, and I'm having a really hard time feeling like that's the right thing to do. And I know that we're not up for rewriting the BEP tonight, but we keep saying that we don't want to talk about discipline. We want to be proactive. We want to talk about support. We want to talk about curriculum and climate, and we're not talking about it. We're talking about discipline. I mean, none of us are in schools every day. We don't want, we're not the right people to be doing this. So I would like to have a discussion about what else we could do next year. We've talked about this idea of a pilot a couple of times of empowering our schools and our staff who are at the right stage in maturity to explore alternative approaches to positive behavior support. And I would like to have a discussion about what that could look like next year as a innovation, as an incubator, as a pilot, whatever you want to call it, but something that will teach us more than what section of a chart does something live in. So I guess the question goes back to you, this isn't the first time we've said this, so what recommendations do you guys have in terms of what will teach us more, right? We're all learning here. Nobody has an answer. If anybody in the entire country had an answer, everybody would be copying it. So how do we empower our schools to explore and use their skills and our students and use their skills to help us figure this out? So, because this isn't it.
So I think part of the strategy, if you remember back to 2 weeks ago, is to really focus on this idea of school-based decision-making. It is something that we want to try universally with a staff voice strategy and a student voice strategy in our schools next year. Really starting to think about what it is going to look like for some of the lower level behaviors that you have mentioned this is now the third time we've come together of how to start addressing those things. We also have some pretty concrete
But
actions.
say more, like what does that look like in staff?
It's going to look different at every school, I think, because each school is going to engage their staff or their students in a different way as they see fit.
So does that mean that a school could determine to operate outside of this chart for lower level behaviors?
I think it would be a discussion that we would start, and then we would action plan and think about what the impact could be and the unintended consequences to just jump to that.
Now's the time to start that discussion.
Yeah, and,
right?
and we are in the culture and climate visits seeing who is ready for those conditions, what systems are in place that would support that, and then what summer planning could be done to support it as well. So it is systematically going, step by step to make sure that at each checkpoint we're making sure that that our school is supported, that they have a clear strategy, that they have a clear vision. I still think it comes down to implementation. Tweaking or no tweaking, it's the implementation of some of the strategies that both our schools have told us and that we have named that are important to implement with fidelity to get to the end. And in those culture and climate visits, we don't have any school that is hitting on implementation at all. Fives, which would be exemplar implementation amongst all of our strategies. Each one of our schools goes through that process to find out what work they still have to do, want to do, and engaging their staff in that. We know SBLTs are a critical lever to do that, but we also know culture and climate action teams, which we're trying to develop in schools, can support an SBLT, can support some of this discussion that we want to have about school-based decision making.
So I guess I'm looking for something maybe a little more clear earlier in the year. I would love to be able to vote this month on a path towards some experimentation to help us all learn together how to get better at this. And so, and what I hear is that we're talking about stuff, but there's no deadline, there's no choice that we're marching towards that will empower our staff and schools to drive behavior implementation in a way that's more tailored and perhaps a bit more free for them. And maybe that's not a choice that we all want to make, but I would like the opportunity to make that choice.
Jen, Dean, Nikki.
I know that the discussion we began at our last meeting was about working with our partners at MTI to devise an approach to school-based decision-making specific to level 1 and level 2 classroom behavior. And that was, what Quinn was referencing. And we also talked about moving some funds from the BET budget specifically to support the school-based decision-making for classroom behaviors. I just want to make sure what's in your head is in mine too, Kate. And I think because level 1 and level 2, that there's a lot of discretion that actually exists there already. I think that we want to help people learn how to use that discretion.
That's right.
But and to have the resources to actually implement the ideas that they have related to those low-level behaviors. Are you wondering about waiving schools for pilots when it comes to the higher level behaviors? 3s, 4s, and right? Like that, I'm trying to get a sense for that because I feel like we've got a really strong solution for supporting schools on the low-level behaviors. We want to work in partnership with schools. And there's already freedom. It's just more about resources and execution and kind of making sure that we're clear that we're granting that kind of discretion.
I think it's really hard to separate the two.
Yeah.
And I think as long as central office is driving focus and accountability and data and all of the things that we are driving you to do also, it's going to be very difficult to keep the focus on the 1s and 2s, which is I actually think where we want the focus to be 90% of the time. And so if we can give enough space for the educators and students who know students and children in our schools, I think that they will naturally focus on the preventive stuff, because nobody wants kids to end up fighting. Not their peers, not their mentors, not their teachers, principals. So I think if we separate them and say, yep, you guys take care of the small stuff, but we're still going to keep an eye on the big stuff, we're still going to end up in this conversation where we're all talking about discipline. And yeah, we need to talk about discipline, and I'm on board with kind of having black and white stuff around multiple fights, but we have to find a way to give more space and focus to the ones and twos. And as long, I mean, we've spent all this time talking about discipline. Like we're repeating, we are repeating the exact same behaviors that got us here, and we've not made any choices or changes to the way that we're operating, but we're somehow expecting to get a different result. So I think we need to be open, even if it's just with 2 schools, to a more fundamental change in how we're operating, because we're literally doing exactly the same thing that got us here, and we're thinking we're going to get a different. So
Dean, Nikki, Mary.
Okay, I'm not exactly sure where you're going.
Well, I want a motion from these guys on what to do.
All right. But I would also not say that the BEP is not working. It's working in many areas, and in some areas we're seeing breakdowns, and it's not system-wide. It's different schools spike at certain times. And this is the. Are we finishing the 5th year of implementation of this now? Fourth year, right? It's the 4th year that we're finishing of implementation of this change, and we've learned a lot about it. And there's implementation issues right from the beginning that we needed to be addressed. So to try to address what you're trying to get at is not going to be done in 2 weeks. There have been some suggestions from some of the MTI proposals and some of the other things that sound really promising as an approach to how to address this, because there's only one way to make this thing across the board, and that's with significant buy-in with every staff around in all of our schools. Yeah. And we knew we weren't going to get that right away. Now, that's not a knock on anybody. That was a response to a really human condition of how people deal with inappropriateness wherever it comes at them. And we've got a system that we're trying to implement so that we can't come down so hard like we did in the past, where we just, at some point, we writ off hundreds and thousands of kids all around the country, where that's not, no one wants that. And we're not going to have that here. We're not going back to anything like that that automatically shuts a kid out. We're going to give them chance after chance after chance with the appropriate intervention, that we're going to figure out what it is that works. So I think maybe next year, as we have 3 board members on here that had no idea until this year, and you just came a month ago, of what the whole discussion around the BEP and how we put it. So I think next year might be a good time for not only the staff to create a committee to review this, but maybe perhaps the board does another ad hoc on it, simultaneously work together on this. I don't know, but something that we should consider and take a really good look at what will work and what's not. And a pilot, I'm not so sure will work, but giving more schools perhaps some flexibility within it to adapt might be a strategy we can use across the board. And also, I think having the SBLT team, the composition of them, being more inclusive in a different way, that people, whatever, if they feel that they're not, that the people on SBLT were handpicked, or they want to get rid of that type of, any type of a suggestion of that, where the schools themselves with teacher leadership and the administration can come together and feel, everyone feels confident that everything is being discussed properly, particularly around discipline and how BEP is introduced. I think that's what I've heard. That's not going to happen by our May meeting, but could happen, and we could set something up between now and September when we start again, and then come at this with a approach that I think needs to be improved. I think the BEP is pretty good, The whole intent is to keep as many kids as we can in school and address their behaviors and go after the root cause of it and address that root cause. If we forget about the root causes, which is why we set the BEP up, then all we're doing is setting up kids to go to prison. And no one here wants any part of that. So let's think on this a little bit stronger, and then maybe the board could address some of the things you're trying to get at in a way that gives us answers, and we can move forward that way.
We have a long queue right now. Nikki, Mary, Gloria, Jen.
All right.
And then I'm in there at the end of that.
Okay, here's the thing. I've been critical of the BEP. I've been critical because it focuses on discipline. Biggest problem with the BEP is not how it's written. Biggest problem is we didn't give enough time to teach the teachers on how to use it. To just scrap it, and that I want to change it. I want to fundamentally change it. But Dean's right. I'm not going to go and write kids out. I'm not going to go and say, let's just put them over here. Let's just forget them. I've seen that happen in too many schools, and the results have shown it through the 90s, through the are we the knots? I don't even know. In the 2000 era, I've seen that at the beginning, and it doesn't help society. It doesn't help schools. What we need to do is to work with the teachers and use what they would like, and to make sure that you have teachers of the student-based leadership team that people listen to, that people respect, and you work it out that way. But we can't make a decision in 2 weeks. We tried rushing it in 3 months. It wasn't doable then, it's not doable now. And any chance to rush it, I'm afraid, will lead to a more segregated environment, and that scares the heck out of me.
Mary.
Dean, I appreciate you putting the context of where we've been. And I believe we're here tonight, and we've been discussing this 3 times because this was the year to take the policy and tweak it in response to what we see at the schools. 95% of this work is done in the schools every single day with our staff and our administrators and with our students and those interactions. And so I think this is just the framework that is a set of rules, but it doesn't necessarily address the fundamental issues. I don't think it's meant to. I think what we're here today is to, and which I hope we do at the end of this month, is in response to what we're hearing from our staff, is to update the plan in some minor ways in order to give the tools to better support those efforts that are going on every single day in our schools and with our staff. And so I don't think we should get distracted by that this isn't addressing the fundamental issues. No, that work has to continue. It has to, and we have to be open to the recommendations of our staff and the people who are on the ground every single day in doing that. So I think the better we can support that, the more innovative ideas. There is no roadmap. There is no clear answers. What we have to be able to do, though, is to support what we are hearing, to adjust that strategy as time goes on, and to keep focused on the values that I believe are fundamental to the BEP, and understand that we do have to change things. The status quo is not acceptable to any of us, but I believe that this is a step forward that helps support the efforts in the schools, and I think we should just prepare ourselves for a journey, a long journey here, that and we're just a small part. But we better be supporting what our staff and our students at our schools believe is going to help address these issues.
Gloria.
So I do feel a sense of urgency on this. You know, I mean, I think that, you know, I think the BEP is a long-term vision, and I think it's going to work. I mean, but I feel like the answer is within our schools. Our teachers, our students, we just heard from students tonight, they have the answers, and we have to give them the opportunity to come up with how they want to respond to the behavior in our schools at all levels, right? I mean, they have to be part of this process, and we have to do it quickly. I mean, I don't think we can wait. I think they are the experts. They know how to respond, and we should be able to allow them to do that. And make them part of this discussion in this process. I want to hear from every school on what kinds of behaviors they're experiencing and seeing, and give them the opportunity to come back with solutions, so that that can be part of our discussion moving forward. That can't wait. I mean, next year is going to be coming September, and we need to be able to have their voice in the process now. And I'm not saying that's going to solve all of our issues, but they have to be part of this discussion.
Jen.
Yeah, I was just going to reiterate that point. That we've already begun to move on spring, summer, going into fall, pushing into school-based decision-making for addressing those classroom-level behaviors for all the reasons that you guys just described. I do want to remind you that we do have some central office more driven pilots on things like alternatives to suspension, which are getting at just some creative ways to deal with some of the bigger behaviors, but those are central office driven. I'm keenly aware of that. And a reminder to the board that as we rewrite our framework, much of which addresses a lot of the things, or is responsive to a lot of the things that our West students brought up today, we're going to be having a discussion about innovation in early June. Because again, this is a way of working that we haven't really defined or figure out how to implement well. And I think there's an opportunity to think about this idea that Kate has around bigger pilots above and beyond school-based decision-making about behavior response. And so I look forward to that discussion, and I think that might be a place where we can at least codify our approach to larger innovations, which might require policy waivers, not just with this work, but with all kinds of work, if we want to break through to some new kinds of solutions. So we could talk more about that soon. I feel the urgency, too.
I said I was last in the queue, and somebody can come in after me, too. I don't think that, I agree with a lot what was said. I have differences with a lot that was said. I think that as a board, as we go into a year when we're looking at more significant changes in either language or approach or resourcing or flexibility or whatever, I think the Dean's suggestion of an ad hoc for next year to be working, if not meeting every month, meeting perhaps every other month, and being more on top of this next year is really important. I think that if we can find opportunities for flexibility at the school level for the coming year, and also just, people talk about the school level. What tonight we did was we took away some of the flexibility that existed. We didn't do it, but that's what that language around suspensions does, is takes away some of the flexibility. And so I think we should be aware that we're being contradictory there, and maybe we have disagreements. But there's a lot here, and I don't think we're going to get anywhere with it tonight. At the last meeting, I think I brought up 4 things that were not there, and in some things. One of them was the dress code. I'm willing to accept that we're not going to do that this year. One of them is the suspensions and expulsions at level 5 with students with disability, and the larger issue with integrating responses to students with disability, which I think came up in the discussion of the fighting tonight, into it. Some of that is practice, not policy. So again, it could be policy, but I'm willing to pull that aside. I understand reasons why the BEP does not apply in most, almost all situations with MSCR. What I don't understand is what are the behavior expectations for MSCR and how are they enforced? And I think that as a board that runs programs that tens of thousands of people use on a monthly basis, that and a place where many of our students are, and important academic and out-of-school time supports are going there, that what does a firearm in an MSCR site mean? Because we've seen that happen more than once. And I think that as a board, we've never discussed any of that, ever. And I think we need to be very aware of that. So that's not part of this rewrite, but that can't fade. Finally, the issue of 4400, either provide or I will offer language at the meeting when we vote on the behavior education plan, because 4400 is embedded in the behavior education plan on language that clarifies that a police officer participating in a targeted search of a student's person or possessions invokes 4400, that this is considered an investigation. And if that language passes, it passes. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But I will be bringing that language forward. I asked for you to bring it forward, and you didn't, so I will bring it forward myself. Any other final comments?
But we did not address Kate's disruption. And so just really very briefly, not Kate's disruption. Kate, speaking of disruption.
a lot tonight, so
So Kate, the way that it is currently defined, you're speaking of the qualifier, right? That this does not include when a student may occasionally engage with instruction in a manner that's not aligned with classroom expectations. So you are suggesting we remove that?
The language around interruptions and side conversations.
So you want interruptions and side conversations to be viewed as disruptions?
No, take them out.
Okay, so we say that they do not. This does not include when a student may occasionally engage in
I understand.
instruction.
I want to leave that up to the discretion of the person in the room.
So you want to pull that whole statement, that
delete
line
it.
up. Thank you. That's where I was misunderstanding you. Got it. Perfect. Thank you.
I want to entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Laura? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.